Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. Summer is officially days away, but the latest podcast is here now as I babble and ramble about everything that's going on in sports, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with your host, JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back and have another birthday shout out, which is an absolute must. I won't give her age out, but today is my mom's birthday, and a big one at that. I'll just leave it right there. Happy birthday, Ma. Hope you enjoy this day to the fullest with many, many more to come. Just so you know that your son loves you, here from New York all the way down to Puerto Rico where she resides. And I'm sure she's probably just boiling down there as much as she detests the heat, the just humidity, etc. But that's all right. It's going to be hot and humid here in the Northeast. The heat wave is arriving and I'm loving it. Summer, as I mentioned, just a few days away. And let me just put all that aside because there's a lot of other things that are happening in the world of sports that's certainly hot. And the first one, I'll get to the NBA, I'll get to the Stanley Cup Finals, some interesting parallels there, obviously baseball and even Trevor Lawrence. But if there's someone that's hot right about now, and I don't care if he slept in an ice bucket, ice bath, you name it. But has anybody seen Rory McIlroy since he drove out of that parking lot in Pinehurst 2 down in South Carolina late afternoon, early evening yesterday? Because if there's anybody that is steaming and just has smoke coming out of his ears, but the only person that he can blame is himself. And I don't want to pile on Rory here because he played magnificently up until he got to the 15th hole. And before I even get to that, I know the golf course played a huge factor throughout the course of the weekend, as evidenced by the scores, unlike the PGA last month where you just saw scores in the 20s. As far as players shooting so many strokes under, a la Xander Schauffele when it was the 21 under when it was all said and done. And then you have yesterday and pretty much throughout the course of the weekend where everybody was hovering around 4, 5, 6 under. Even Bryson Dechambeau, who started yesterday's round at 7 under, and that was the highest anybody had gotten throughout the course of the weekend. As a matter of fact, I believe, now that I think about it, Rory was at 8 under, had a 2-stroke lead with 5 to go. A just total gag job on his part. But the golf course did stay true to what we talked about on Thursday. Certainly the antithesis of what we saw there last month at Valhalla with the PGA. And now you had a scenario going into the weekend where the players at the top of the leaderboard, whether your name is Patrick Cantlay, whether your name is obviously Rory McIlroy, Bryson Dechambeau made a late run there on Saturday, which put him at the top and had a 3-stroke lead going into yesterday's last round. You had Ludwig Åberg, who also was at the top going into Saturday, but then he fell apart. He shot 73 Saturday and yesterday and fell out of the top of the leaderboard. And that's pretty much set the stage for yesterday. And everybody, no matter who it was, whether it was Patrick Cantlay, whether it was Tony Finau, but everybody looked at the Dechambeau and possibly Rory McIlroy going mano a mano for whoever was going to come out of this tournament alive and raise the trophy above their heads. And we all know that the McIlroy, his story with everything that has transpired over the past decade, not being able to win a Grand Slam after winning 4 pretty much right out of the gate and having this long drought to get to this point where, although he was 3 strokes behind starting yesterday, but a lot of people thought momentum, good spirits, getting back together and reconciling with his wife so he doesn't have that piano on his back heading into the weekend, or in particular heading into yesterday's last round. And as it was, he was just putting on a performance there where he birdied 3 holes there from holes 8 to 13, which set up those last 5 holes. And unfortunately for him, set him into a deep hole where, like I mentioned at the top, has anybody found him since around 6:50 last night. And for McIlroy, let's just get right to it. It looked like he was going to win this tournament considering that he had a 2-stroke lead with 5 holes to go, and his putter, which we all know, can be up and down, and especially from 4 feet in, he is automatic. Now, I understand you can say that for a lot of golfers, but when the game gets a little bit tight and you know you have to make those shots, this is where McIlroy gets in trouble. I remember one year at the Masters, I believe going back to, I think 2015 to 16 off the top of my head, having a lead going into the final round, and his putter amongst all of his other clubs just went awry. And now you had a scenario where he was in great shape, knowing that he just had to get through the last 5 holes, and what happened? 15, 16, and 18 in particular, from 4 feet in, gagged on putts where he should have been able to do that with his eyes closed. And that had Dechambeau just a little bit of some light where he was able to go through the door. And let's get right to it. On 18, where his tee shot went to the left, same for McIlroy for that matter. But not only was that second shot by Dechambeau, as he was trying to make his approach to the green, went into the bunker, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, geez, he's going to have probably one of the most perfect shots that you could ever imagine a golfer could have. And sure enough, deep in that bunker, 55 feet from the hole, what did he do? He put it around 4 feet close to the cup, where he even said in the post-match interview that it was the best shot that he had of his life, and he needed that. Because who knows, with the way those greens are, and it looks like it was on a spoon where it could have rolled left, it could have rolled right, it could have went 10 feet, it could have gone 15 feet, etc. But it happened to fall right where it absolutely had to, and then for him to just drop it in, final shot to win the tournament, where you saw Rory in the clubhouse where he just got up and left, knowing that with that approach there by Dechambeau and falling that short, I'm sure from that point on, McIlroy had to be sick to his stomach. And I get it that he could probably look to Dechambeau today, and obviously nobody has spoken to him since he left yesterday's performance and yesterday's tournament off into the night, did not speak to anybody in the media, were unable to get a quote, and that's a bad job on his part. I'll get to that in a second. But the only person he can blame is himself, and I'm sure he's kicking himself, and I'm sure he has not slept a wink since last night. But for Dechambeau to make that shot, that's going to be one that's going to be remembered forever, because not only that shot that he had to get away from the tree, which led to the bunker, and you probably thought to yourself, he may end up going into a playoff with McIlroy, but that shot was just as beautiful as you could possibly get and see. Just an unbelievable shot there by Dechambeau, which set him up for the putt to win the tournament. His second U.S. Open in the last 5 years. He did win in 2020, pretty much right up the road in Mamaroneck at Winged Foot. And Dechambeau, he's a guy that I haven't really liked over the years, but considering what happened there at the Ryder Cup, with he and Brooks Koepka kind of mending the fences thanks to Justin Thomas, and him having a little bit more of a personality, not to say that he's bombastic or not to say that he's a guy that you would just want to push away because he's just too pompous. Obviously, these players have an ego, as we all know. But Dechambeau over the last couple of years has repaired a little bit of that image that he's had as just a guy that just grips it and rips it, a guy that just wants to muscle his way throughout the golf course, a guy that just wants to put a stranglehold on wherever it is that he plays and just pretty much suffocate the rest of the field. And even with him jumping to live and him being a guy that over the last couple of years, maybe live, who knows, maybe it's humbled him a little bit. Maybe he's had a little bit more of a personality. If you saw that last month in the PGA, where the one golf ball I believe he threw into the crowd and he said, no, give it to the kid, and certainly looked very personable and very down to earth and even likable in that matter. And even yesterday in the post-match, all the things that he said, unbelievable shot, gave nothing but kudos to Rory McIlroy, threw him his flowers despite the fact that was in defeat. And Dechambeau, what more can you say? We know he's a top player. We know he's a guy. Yes, did he jump for the money at LIV? And I guess you can't even question that, considering if they're going to throw you boatloads of money, you're going to take it. And even though he'll still play in these major tournaments, obviously we'll see him next month there, barring any injuries or anything crazy, at the British Open. But just a magnificent moment for Dechambeau to come out on top. And even, not to say that by any means this sticks it to Rory, but sometimes karma, as I like to say, never forgets an address. And I'm not trying to say that McIlroy deserved to lose, but you'd have to think that, to me, in watching what unfolded, he spit the bit. He gagged. And even though Dechambeau made the shot of his life and he earned that championship, but let's face it, McIlroy should have won this tournament. And for all the things that he said when Liv and PGA were trying to work out a deal, or even before that, when Liv was just plucking players or taking players left and right, and what he said about the Liv Golf League, and, oh, I would never go there, and all the things that he said, not to rehash all that. And even though he had to temper that here over the last year or so, and somewhat welcome them with open arms, maybe reluctantly, but for everything that led up until yesterday, and you have to wonder whether or not that the golf gods looked at McIlroy and said, not only are you not going to win this tournament, but you're going to have a guy that jumped to the other league, and a league that you just railed left and right. To have him come out on top is even going to make you sicker, and just another devastating loss. And McIlroy's now lost 2 U.S. Opens by just 1 stroke, because he lost last year to Wyndham Clark out in L.A., but obviously not in this type of fashion where he had the lead late in the back 9, and for him to just throw up all over himself. And not only that, but on top of just losing the tournament and not making just simple putts, or at least what we would see. It's easy for us to say that on our living room sofa, but for a guy as good as he's been, and yes, is he one of the top 5, 7 golfers in the world? Absolutely. It doesn't show on the score sheet when it comes to major tournaments, as we know, which for whatever the reason is confounding to me, because this is a guy that should at least have won maybe somewhere in the vicinity 7, 8, maybe even close to 10, and that may be a little bit of a stretch, but let's just double his output. He has the 4 majors that he's won. You would think that he would have at least 7 or 8 by now, and he has not won since going back to the 2014 year. And now you have a scenario where he didn't even meet the media, which is an awful job by him. And I get it. He is just distraught, despondent, and probably had no words. But you know what? You take a few minutes, you suck it up, have a glass of water, maybe even take a sip of a beer or 2, or a couple of sips of a beer. Maybe a beer or 2 would have been too much. He probably would have laid it all on the line and probably would still be talking at this moment. And listen, I don't know if he's a drinker or not, so got to give him that respect. But let's just say, for argument's sake, just take a moment, regroup, face the music, and that's that. Now he goes off into the night. We don't know where he's at. For all we know, he's probably even out of the country. And it's a scenario where he's going to have to answer these questions, whether it's the next tournament or even next month at the British, where this is all going to dredge up again, and they're going to ask him, how did you feel? What happened? What happened on 15, 16, and 18? And he's going to have to relive this thing all over again. And I understand it's easy for me to say that because I'm not the one that lost this tournament, but that's what I mean. Regroup, get it together, find a way, or just even come out with a statement. Say, hey guys, I'm not going to field questions, but this was all on me. I just gagged here in the biggest spot that I've had in quite some time. I don't really have much else to say. I'll answer questions later on. If you would have said that, at least you would have gotten an answer, or at least some responses as to what happened there over the last 4 holes of this tournament. And now he goes wherever he's at on this planet to the point where, one more time, he's going to have to answer to the media, to the critics, to everybody, whenever that may be. And who knows if he's going to do that. I would think he would do that at the next tournament, whatever that is. I'm sure there's probably one this coming weekend or the following. And it's just a shame that it has to come down to this for him. But he made his bed, now he has to lie in it. And now it's even worse because everybody must be wondering, how's he doing first and foremost? And I mean that with all sincerity, even though I started off with that tongue-in-cheek as far as, has anybody seen Rory McIlroy? But hey, let's hope that he's okay. Let's hope that he's just kind of getting it together, getting his thoughts, etc. Who knows if he's going to come out with some sort of statement or tweet or whatever. And even then, he's still going to have to answer to the media at some point, because it's not as if he could come out with a newspaper ad or come out with the post of all time, whether it's on Instagram, social media, etc. But it's still not going to be the same as if he were to face the music, meet the media, and just answer it all in one shot, and then hopefully try to erase it as fast as he possibly can. And what more can you say? Just a terrible job by McIlroy. I don't know what was in his head at that time. Maybe he had some snakes in his head, knowing that he was that close And maybe he was just so pumped up knowing that he had a 2-stroke lead and certainly had destiny in his own hands and he just let it slip away. I don't know. But it definitely does show that the mental and even testicular fortitude for one Rory McIlroy is fragile. He should have put that tournament away. And that's all I'll say about that. I could go into it a little bit deeper. I know we could get on maybe a guy like Ludwig Åberg, who had the lead there come into the weekend, but he still had 2 rounds to go. And like I said, he shot 73 both Saturday, Sunday. All right, fine. Scottie Scheffler, he barely made the cut. Lucky for him that he did. And I don't know if there was any after effects from what happened there at the PGA. And again, that was last month, so I'm not going to get too wrapped up into that. But considering Scheffler was nowhere to be found on the tournament throughout the course of the weekend, well, hey, I guess you just chalk it up to A, maybe the golf course itself, or B, just not playing up to Scheffler's ability and what we've seen from him so far. And that's another thing about Scheffler that you have to wonder about, because yes, he's won the 2 Masters, and yes, we want to see him win another major outside of the Masters. And here it was, the PGA, I get it, the Friday he gets arrested, he shot well that day, but then Saturday it went awry for him, and then he did recoup on Sunday, but was nowhere near the top of the leaderboard. And then here, forget about it, he might as well have been Casper the Ghost, because he was nowhere to be found throughout the 4 days down at Pinehurst 2 in South Carolina. So there's questions about Scheffler, whether or not he's a guy that, yes, he starts off his years great, and he did win at the Memorials we talked about on last Monday's podcast, Jack Nicklaus's tournament there, and a lot of people thought maybe the momentum going in would be good for him considering what happened at the PGA. But again, the invisible man, Claude Rains. And for Scheffler, you have to even wonder a little bit whether or not he starts out of the gate fast in these tournaments, especially as we've seen here with the Masters. But now we're already 3 tournaments in, 1 more major to go. As I mentioned, of course, the Open, or the British Open, formerly known as the British Open. And now let's see what he's going to do here between now and then. I'm sure he's going to probably play in a couple of tournaments. Maybe he'll generate more buzz, win another tournament or 2, and you feel like, all right, let's see if Scottie Scheffler is going to be back on the beam here. And then who knows what's going to happen when we get to the middle of next month. And then Tiger, for everything that he said, and I'm not going to pile on Tiger. I already said what I had to say about him on Thursday's podcast, and even going back to the PGA, did not make the cut. I get it that he was trying to look at this tournament knowing that it was going to be in warm weather. It was going to be a mostly flat course. In fact, it was all flat, where he didn't have to worry about walking up and down hills or have to worry about warming up to get ready for his tee time or anything like that. The warm weather, obviously, you're going to just wake up, have a bottle of water, and let it go. But for Tiger not making the cut, and there was a lot of others. Max Homa didn't make the cut. A lot of other big-time golfers, same status for them. But for Tiger, who, not to say he came in thinking that he was going to win the tournament, and of course he is Tiger Woods, he's going to paint it however he wants to, and he has the right to, even at the age of 48 years of age, and all of the surgeries and the injuries and everything that's pretty much kept him sidelined and has made himself a shell of his old self, not making the cut. Are you surprised? Because he's Tiger, maybe a little bit, but at the same time, this is Tiger pretty much since the Masters in 2019, and obviously he had the car accident in 2021. He has not been the same player. And who knows if we're ever going to see that guy again, and I'm going to go down that road right now, so I don't want to do that. But Tiger not making the cut, no surprise, and let's see if he's going to even go across the pond to play in the Open, because as we all know, you're going to have 50-degree days, you're going to have blustery days, you're going to have windy, rainy days, and that's definitely not going to be conducive for Tiger, his body, to get himself prepared and ready to go. Yeah, maybe between the ears, but the body probably will tell him, Tiger, not today. So we'll have to wait and see on whether or not he's going to participate there. And it was a thrilling ending. What more can you say? DeChambeau makes the great shot. McIlroy, as I've stated several times here over the first, 20 minutes here, but just an awful job. And let's see if McIlroy is going to be able to regroup and see if he could get himself and muster enough mental, spiritual, psychological energy, because we know the physical ability is there, but the other 3 aforementioned, we have to see whether or not he's going to be primed and ready to go. And who knows, maybe the golf gods will have something in it for him to where he'll go to the British, and next thing you know, he'll be able to raise the trophy and finally snap this 10-year hex of him not winning a major tournament. So I had to start off there because that was just a thrilling ending to that tournament, especially with Rory there and everything that surrounds him. Of course, I had to bring that up. Now as I put my golf clubs away and lace up the high tops, and even the skates for this first part, it will be separate when I talk NBA Finals and Stanley Cup Finals, but there are the parallels, as I'm about to explain here, and one of the parallels happens to be the two teams that were the favorites going into this series, whether it was the Celtics in the NBA or the Florida Panthers in the NHL. And both of them did get off to 3-0 leads. We talked about it on Thursday, how the Celtics did win the night prior to the podcast on Thursday. They went up 3-0. And a lot of people thought, including myself, it could possibly be a sweep. And with the Panthers winning on Thursday night, where they had a 4-1 lead in Edmonton, but then they had to hang on there and was able to get game 3, and you thought to yourself, oh God, this is going to be a short series. I'm sure the commissioners, Adam Silver, Gary Bettman, right now, as I like to say, choking on the Sauvignon Blanc, knowing that they're not going to get any length in this series, not that they're going to get anything close to even a 6th game, let alone a 5th game. Well, they did get a 5th game, and here where the parallels begin. You have the two underdogs, where the Mavericks have, of course, Luka and Kyrie, but I'm going to stick to Luka for a moment. This is his first finals. We know that he's a top 2-3 player in the league, future MVP. He's not won an MVP just yet. But we know the impact that Luka has in his sport, maybe not amongst the levels that we've seen Connor McDavid in his sport. He's won 3 MVPs. And obviously Luka hasn't. And off the top of my head, I believe McDavid is about a year or two older than Luka. And not to say that Luka's in that same stratosphere, but as being one of the best players in the sport for Luka, as well as McDavid being the best player in the sport, and for Edmonton, getting to a cup final, first time, same for Luka, and now both in 3-0 holes, wondering, are they going to be able to win a game in this series? This is their first experience, first go-around against teams that have been to a final, Celtics 2 years ago, and of course the Panthers last year, that you had all this just combined and made it for a fascinating storyline to where now we have an even deeper parallel, because you had the Game 4, the Mavericks just paced the Celtics, ran them out of the gym, and the Celtics were in the game early. First 6 minutes, they were down by a point. I believe it was what? They had an 11-10 lead, and then after that, the wheels fell off to the point where Luka, after him getting blasted in Game 3 by the press, including Brian Windhorst, and I commend him for his assessment of Luka Doncic just wanting to get fouls, just talking to the bench, saying you better challenge this, whatever, acting like a spoiled baby, let's face it. But for Luka, who had 29 points, did not shoot well, which is typical of Luka. It's not that he has a great shooting percentage, but 12 for 26, 29 points, obviously sat the whole fourth quarter, 0 for 8 from 3, so people could look at what he did in the first half, and I get it. He set the tone, obviously, with his elbows and his shoulders and just trying to draw contact, typical Luka, but not have a great game. I know Kyrie had 21, much more efficient in his shooting, a lot of contributions. You saw the alley-oops, you saw the dunks, the Derek Lively's of the world, and you even had contributions from other players who had not made contributions in this series for the Dallas Mavericks, and it was pretty much a laugher from the midway point of the second quarter throughout. 61-35 at the half, 35 points for the Celtics at halftime. I mean, think about that, to the point where they were down by 48 halfway through the fourth quarter. Celtics, I don't know what happened there. The preparation, maybe they checked out in the second quarter thinking that, oh, we could just go home and win, which is dangerous. Very dangerous, I might add, despite the fact they're up 3-0. But for a team that was looking to close out and win a championship, I think it was the third worst deficit in the history of the NBA Finals, which, come on. I don't know what happened there, and I get it. They were blitzkrieged by the Mavericks, but boy, there was just a lack of everything on the Celtics. And all right, that's a game you just flush, throw it away, don't even look at the tape. You already know how bad it is, but let's just keep that in mind, because then now I'm going to tie this in with the Florida Panthers. Now, the Panthers win that game number 3, and they had to hang on there for dear life. I know they got the 2 goals there in the third. They were up 4-1. Edmonton scores twice, and then they had that play with a couple of minutes to go where McDavid was in the crease, passed it right in front, went through the legs of Sergei Bobrovsky, and then Ryan McLeod had a point-blank shot, which if that would have gone in, if they would have scored there and tied the game, I thought Edmonton was going to win the game. But as it was, they were able to hang on. Florida wins 4-3, and then Saturday night, Edmonton gets right out of the gate. They score 2 goals, and then you thought to yourself, whomever scores that next goal, whether it be Florida or Edmonton, that was going to be a huge goal. And as it was, Vladimir Tarasenko, who's actually played pretty well here in this series, scored that goal, made it 2-1, and then you really thought, uh-oh, is this where Edmonton now is going to start to just fold like a cheap suit? As it was, they did get the goal later on. I believe that was Dylan Holloway to make it 3-1, and he scored 2 goals in the game, and that was just minutes right after. But for then Edmonton at that point on, then it just took over. Connor McDavid finally got his first ever Stanley Cup final goal, 4-1, and then they just piled it on to the point where they won 8-1, going away. They even pulled Sergei Bobrovsky, the Panthers, after the 5th goal, and they just figured, let's just mail it in. We'll put our tail between our legs. We're still up 3-1. We got the road game, and we'll try to go back home and win a Stanley Cup championship. And now this is where the parallels come back. How I feel, if you're the Celtics and the Panthers, those were games, one more time. You don't even watch the tape. You flush it. You don't even think about it. That is it. Now, if you're Dallas and Edmonton, you kind of wish that you could save some of those goals or points for Game 5, because obviously you got to go on the road. You have to go into hostile territory to the point where there's going to be a coronation before the coronation begins. The fan bases in Boston and Sunrise, they're going to be primed and ready to go to celebrate. And especially for the Celtics, and even more so for the Panthers, because they've never won a Stanley Cup championship. So that I can even understand more for them. Granted that they've only been around 30 years, well, the Celtics have been around since day one, but they haven't won a title since 2008. And then the irony, and I mentioned this on last Monday's podcast, you can check the receipts. Today is the 16th anniversary of the Celtics' last NBA championship. Against the Lakers, 132-93, June 17th, 2008. So maybe there's an omen and synergy there where the Celtics will put the lid on the NBA season tonight. As a Celtic fan, only one could hope so. And I'll get into different particulars about what will happen Game 5 for both sports. But for the parallels, I think both Dallas and Edmonton, because of what happened in Game 4 for both of them, they are going to be going up, you know what, Schitt's Creek without a paddle. And that's not a guarantee. That's not to say that they're going to automatically lose and get blown out in these games. But if Dallas and Edmonton won, let's say, close games, where 4-3 for Edmonton, or let's say 110-109 for Dallas, give these Celtics something to think about. All right, they're going home court advantage, ready to celebrate a championship for each team. But because they were blowouts, those are games that you could just easily wash away. Those aren't the type of games that are going to stick to your ribs or stick to your stomach to the point where, man, we should have won that game. Oh, man, we were that close. Yes, embarrassing as it was for both teams, but that's something that's going to sit with them. Think about it. For both teams, for Boston and Florida for 3 days. So now as you get to tonight's Game 5, before I get to tomorrow, tonight you have a scenario where everything is aligned. We talked about the 16-year anniversary, etc. I can see the Celtics, they know that they do not want to get on a plane and go back to Dallas. They've been down this road before from a standpoint of being down 0-3 in a series. Last year against the Miami Heat, they talked about that in the previous series with the Indiana Pacers. And I'm sure the last thing you want to do is give Dallas life. And if Dallas is in the game in the fourth quarter, let's say within 2 baskets, and I'm talking about 2 threes. So if they're down 6 with 5 minutes to go, watch out. They're going to have to go back to the game plan of attacking Luka. That's why he fouled out in Game 3 as it was. They're going to have to play defense the way they did, especially in Game 1. Who knows what's going to happen with Kristaps Porzingis? Right now, it's a toss-up. I would think he's not going to play more so than he will play. And we know how much of a factor he's been in the 2 games that he played, especially with those first 2 being at home and them winning, for the most part, comfortably. So for the Mavericks, I know they're going into a hornet's nest tonight. They're going to have to get those contributions that they got in Game 4 from the players such as Derek Lively, P.J. Washington, Derek Jones Jr., how about Tim Hardaway, who finally dusted off the mothballs and had 5 threes in 6 minutes. You're going to need to get that type of performance if you're the Mavericks in order for you to survive and go back to Big D with a win and maybe quite possibly push this to a 7th game. But I really think this is going to be, I don't want to say it's going to be a tall order, but that crowd is going to be just buzzing. They are going to be ready to celebrate. They have not had a chance to celebrate a title, like I said, in 16 years. And going back to 2010, not winning that title against the Lakers, obviously 2 years ago where they had a Game 6 in their building, where the Golden State Warriors won a championship on that floor. And now, here it is. This is their moment to win this game. I'm sure this is all the players could focus on. Could there be some pressure? Could there be some tightness? I think there'll only be tightness if you get into the second half and either they're trailing or the Mavericks are within striking distance. Other than that, I can see them blowing this, not blowing the game. I can see them blowing out the Mavericks here tonight. Not to say it'll be early, but maybe even late. I can almost see a Game 1 effect, and I would think Porzingis, he's going to try to do his best, even just to do or play 5 or 8 minutes or whatever he could give him. Because I think whatever shot in the arm that Porzingis could give them could be that boost that the Celtics would need in order for them to win. Just look what happened in Game 1. He did his own Willis Reed impersonation, not coming out for warm-ups, and then he came out, the crowd, got threes, blocks, etc. If he could do just a quarter of that in tonight's game, I think that will bode well for the Celtics. And I'd be, I don't want to say shocked, because again, there is that part of me, and I've said this all along, that doesn't trust this team. But I would think with the 3 days off, after being embarrassed there on Friday night, that they will seal the deal and win a championship tonight. And as far as the Panthers go, I think it's the same scenario. Now, Edmonton, after Game 3, Leon Draisaitl, I believe, was the one that said that we could do it. We could, one game at a time, one shift at a time, etc. And they have the firepower. But Edmonton is kind of like the Celtics in that regard, where you don't know which team's going to show up. And I'm sure tomorrow night down in Sunrise, Florida, they're going to be ready to celebrate a first ever championship. And if you're Edmonton, you're going to have to stem that tide in those first few minutes. And more importantly, and I get it, they are Jekyll and Hyde, so you don't know, but they're going to have to jump out to a lead here. Because I think if they go down 1-0, it will be 2-0 quick. And then if they're down 2-0, Florida is just going to impose their will on McDavid, Draisaitl, Zach Hyman, etc. So they're going to have to play from in front, and they're going to have to play from in front throughout. Because even if it's 2-0 and they tie the game, all the momentum is going to be on the Panthers side. And I don't know if I trust Edmonton. And granted, they've had their moments. Remember, they survived Game 7 in Vancouver. They've won big games that they absolutely had to have throughout the course of this Stanley Cup run. And as they did, they won Game 4. Okay, fine. They blew them out. So they did not only save face, but show some pride. But now this is where it's really going to be the ultimate test for them, whether or not they're going to try to jump on the Panthers quick, fast, hurry, and in an early fashion, or are they just going to kind of play at their pace or be that boxer where it's like, all right, let's see how they're going to come out, how we're going to... No, they're going to have to play aggressive from the start. So for Edmonton, I think this is also going to be a tough scenario. I think the Panthers are going to win tomorrow night. I'd be shocked. In this case, I'd be shocked. I'd actually be more shocked if Edmonton were to win a Game 5 than Dallas were to win a Game 5. So that's how I'm going to look at both of those series. I think they're going to be done by the time we get to the podcast on Thursday. And to think, if we do get to Thursday's podcast, that will be Game 6 in Dallas if the Celtics were to lose tonight. And then if the Panthers were to lose, you'll have Game 7 in Edmonton on Friday. So the rest of that schedule, all you got to do is just tack on 3 more days, where if we do get to a Game 7, and heaven forbid, in the NBA Final, that will be Sunday. And then for the Stanley Cup Final, that'll be a week from tonight. So we'll have to wait and see on that. So that's what we have there with both the finals, NBA and Stanley Cup. Let me see if there's anything else I need to add on to that. Well, there's some NBA notes that I'll get to in a second, and NHL as well. So I'll touch on that in a moment. But it's all right in front of, for the Panthers and the Celtics. They know what they need to do. I would think they're going to do what they have to in order for them to secure their titles. And then we can move on to the draft, which is in a couple of weeks, and get ourselves ready for baseball, because you would think by the time we get to Thursday's podcast, both fall and winter sports will be kaput, over and out. So we'll continue to monitor that, as you well know. And I'm going to say this, and I know that I'm a kook, I'm a crazed lunatic when it comes to my teams and being a sports fan. And I know tonight, I could already see it, because I saw it in game one where Mark Wahlberg was in the building, game one of the finals. And where was he? Game four, where his brother Donnie in Indiana, who was at all the games. And he's a guy that's been at Celtic games when the Celtics were bad. And for, let's see, Mark Wahlberg, I could see it on the court there, celebrating with Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, if it just so happens to be that way tonight. And that just burns me. I'm sorry, people. I get it. Oh, why can't these celebrities, or they could just parachute in when they want? Who are you to say, JAYREELZ, what kind of fan they should be? Maybe they just like the game of basketball. I've gotten on Ryan Reynolds in the past, being in the press box with, I understand, his wife, Blake Lively, in the connection with Taylor Swift. But I've said to Ryan Reynolds then, and I'll say it to him now, does he know the difference between a forward pass and a lateral? And Mark Wahlberg, yeah, Celtic fan, but he parachutes in and out. We see him at the Super Bowls when they won with the Patriots. Yeah, but was he in the seats there when Mac Jones was throwing an interception in Buffalo in the playoffs a couple of years ago, or at any of the Patriot games in the last couple of years when they were at the bottom of the AFC East? Chances are probably not, and I get it. People can get on my case and say, oh, well, JAYREELZ, you need to pipe down. You need to just stop talking about that. Yeah, you may be a kook, but you can't tell, or these people have their own lives. Yeah, but you know what? When you show up at a coronation, or you show up at a game one where it's like, hey, I haven't been here all year, so let me show up now. Spike Lee's at all the Knicks games. Jack Nicholson is at the Laker games. So, all right, I understand schedule. You're filming, you're doing this, you're doing that. But you know what? Hey, if you got to be there for a certain game, you got to be there. And don't show up at a game one, or don't show up when you feel like it. Show up when, hey, I got to be there even when my team is bad. And for Mark Wahlberg, we haven't seen that. So unless I see him in the luxury box at Gillette when they're 4-7 and the Jets are coming to town, I don't want to hear it. So I'll just leave it at that. You also have Charles Barkley, who has one more year left, 2024, 25, TNT, the contract, as we know, will, and I don't think it's been official as of yet, or at least hasn't been reported as official, but TNT will have the rights to the NBA games. This is going to be the last year. The following year looks like it's going to be Amazon and NBC that will have the package, as well as ESPN and ABC. So Barkley did say in the post-game of Celtics-Mavs Game 4 to Steve Smith and to the guys at the desk there that he was going to retire, that he was going to pass the baton to the Steve Smiths, to the Jamal Crawfords of the world, to where he feels like that's it. He's done his time with TNT. Obviously, he's had a great run, as we all know. We don't have to get into all of their accolades inside the NBA and what they've done and what they've meant to not only the network, but also to the sport with EJ, Kenny, Shaq, etc. And kudos. We know Barkley, he's great. He speaks what's on his mind, doesn't pull any punches. But the one thing that I have, that let's say after next year, we know he's made a ton of money and he's certainly not crying broke by any stretch, but you do have to wonder, will the Amazons or the NBCs of the world, will they dangle that, I'm not going to say blank check, but Charles, what can we get you to come back to the studio? What is it, 20 million a year, 25, 30? Who knows? Obviously, he's a guy that's been loyal, and I think that's one of the reasons why he feels that it's good for him to retire after next year, because he knows that the contract is up. He knows that EJ is going to stay at TNT. He's been an institution there. As far as Kenny, Shaq, who knows what they have planned. And Charles is saying it right now, which is great. But this time next year, if somebody's going to dangle that carrot, will he bite? That's all I have to say about that. And who knows, he probably won't bite. But maybe down the road after that, if he's bored, or maybe, who knows, he's chomping at the bit, and one of those networks are going to push forth that check right across the table with a contract to say, hey, Charles, what do you think? I'm sure it may be too tough for him to pass off, especially if it's going to be a Godfather offer for him to come back to TV. But kudos to Barkley in announcing his retirement there. And let's see, we have one more year with them, so it's not as if he's saying goodbye or at least see you later in the not too distant future. And as far as the NHL, I know the Utah hockey team, they had all these different names. I talked about this weeks ago. And right now they're settling on the temporary name, which is the Utah Hockey Club, which I'm fine with. So they're going to be the Washington football team of the NHL, at least for 1 year. And I didn't like a lot of the names that they came up with as far as what their new team name was going to be. The one that I liked was the Utah Canyons. And I understand maybe that's a little bit too, I'll say, descriptive, because of course a lot of people may use that as a suggestively sexual connotation. I'll just leave it at that. But I like the Canyons for whatever the reason, and not because of what it may sound, but to me, that's a lot better than the Yeti, the Blizzard, the Ice, the Mountaineers, Utah Mountaineers. That doesn't really have a ring. Utah Canyons at least has a little bit of a ring. And that's just a few that I read. There's some others that were just, to me, did not have a good ring, did not roll off the tongue. Like I said, Utah Mountaineers, I mean, and of course I exaggerated that. But for Utah, it's going to be the hockey club. So we'll see what happens as they move it along. Obviously, none of the names stuck with them. So that's what you have there with the NBA and NHL as we move it along. Now let me get into the batter's box. As I take a sip of much needed water, babbling away here. Baseball, interesting week for the sport, where now it's looking to probably take a lot of the shine, especially if the NBA and NHL seasons conclude tonight and tomorrow, because that's the only sport you're really going to have. And a lot of news and notes have come out throughout the course of the weekend. First one being Phillies-Orioles. I talked about that on Thursday. Phillies won the first game, actually went into extras. It was 2-2. Then both Philly and Baltimore scored in the top of the 10th to make it 3-3. And then the Phillies got two more in the top of the 11th and then won 5-3. And then the Orioles pretty much took it from there, winning the back two pretty comfortably, 6-2 and 8-3, where Craig Kimbrell was serenaded by the Philly fans who drove down I-95 from Philly to Baltimore. I guess, what is that, maybe an hour and a half car ride? And for the Philly faithful to get into Kimbrell's ear, and he said, yeah, I definitely heard it. And Kimbrell, as we all know, he's been a walking tightrope ever since he left Atlanta. He's bounced around here over the years, from the Red Sox winning a title, but certainly had to sweat that out in certain games with him. Going to the White Sox, we know he's been all over the place. Phillies last year, where he did not do well in that Diamondback series. And then now here with Baltimore, where although he did pitch in that game on Saturday, but he came into a 6-2 game, not in a 6-5 or 6-4 game. So that was some fun there between the Philly fans and Kimbrell, but the Orioles did win the back two of that game, or that series, excuse me, and that helped them because the Yankees were in Boston and they lost the back two of their three-game set, to where on Friday night they won 8-1, and it looked like it was going to be a bludgeoning for the weekend, but the Red Sox did do some justice there, winning on Saturday night 8-4, and then had 9 steals in the game yesterday after Aaron Judge, hit a bomb of a home run in the first. And for the Red Sox then to come back and steal bases all over the place, they got to Marcus Stroman, and Carlos Rodon did not pitch well in his own right the night before, though he has pitched well this year and has owned up to that contract that he signed 2 off seasons ago. But the Yankees losing those two, now tied in a loss at the top of the AL East, but they do have 3 games in hand, and I believe they're a game and a half ahead of the Orioles. And guess what? Tomorrow night, showdown number 2 between the O's and Yankees at Yankee Stadium. Looking forward to that, but the Orioles did suffer a big blow as Kyle Bradish, who had that UCL sprain during spring, did come back and now has to go back on the IL. Who knows how serious it's going to be? Is it going to be a thing where it's just going to be rest? Does he need surgery? Right now, it's early to tell. I don't know if the MRI, which I'm sure he may be going through as I speak during this recording. So that is one that the Oriole fans are going to hold their breath, and we're going to have to wait and see whether or not that he's going to come out on the other side, maybe, and even pitch this year. So we'll have to stay put on that. But Orioles-Yankees is your series of the week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Looking forward to that. And even you also have the Braves coming in this weekend to play the Yankees. So an interesting week for the Bombers to play a Brave team that has been up and down, but also still a formidable team in their own right. And then obviously the Orioles to be that litmus test. And remember, this is their second go-around. The Yankees lost 3 out of 4 in Baltimore earlier this year, so you know they're going to want to exact some revenge, and that is a series I'll keep an eye on. Now, as far as other key injuries that have happened, the Dodgers. Saturday had Yoshinobu Yamamoto, had to be put on the IL. I don't know if it's a strained rotator cuff. The other report I saw that it's actually a right triceps flare-up. So is it a triceps or is it a forearm? Who knows? Or rotator cuff, excuse me. So who knows what's going to happen there? It looks like it's going to just be rest. He's not going to pitch for 2 weeks. So you don't have to worry about any red flags as far as MRIs or surgery at the moment. But then you also had yesterday, Mookie Betts gets hit in the hand, fractures his hand. Thankfully for him, no severe breaks to the point where he's going to need surgery. So for Betts, they do dodge a big-time missile there, but at the same time, he's going to be out for a significant amount of time, and it's indefinite as to how long he's going to be out. And you would think that if it's going to be a fractured hand, it's probably going to be minimum 4 to 6 weeks, maybe more 6 than 4. And that's going to be a huge loss to a team, as we all know, with Freeman, and Ohtani, as well as Will Smith. And their lineup is, with that top 3, not really that deep, because you have guys that at the bottom of the order could be pitched to. So let's see what his absence is going to mean. Now, it's not going to mean much as far as the division, because they have the division already intact. I don't think you're going to see any worries, especially after the Padres got swept by the Mets of all teams over the weekend. And that was just a nightmare for the Padres. They go down the Turnpike to play the Phillies, which is an interesting series this week. But the Dodgers are in no danger of losing the division. But the one thing you do have to keep an eye on is maybe, quite possibly, a 2 seed in the NL. And I understand it's way too early to even get into that. But you do have to take a look, considering that the Dodgers, they've had their moments, but they haven't really clicked on all cylinders, and they've been the Dodger team that you would think is going to reel off 100, anywhere between 100 to 105 wins this year. But currently, they are 44-29, but you do have the Brewers at 42-29. So think about it. If the Brewers somehow get the 2 seed, and maybe that would bode well for the Dodgers, considering what happened last year, had the best record in the sport, and what did that get them? A sweep at the hands of the Arizona Diamondbacks in the division series. So I don't know if there's going to be any urgency for them to win, or at least to get the 2 seed, and it's way too early to even get into that. I'm sure if somebody threw that question to Dave Roberts, he may even roll his eyes, but it's a legitimate question considering what has happened here with these teams that have gotten those top 2 seeds, whether your name are the Baltimore Orioles, we saw what happened there last year, got swept by the Texas Rangers, or the Braves, as we've seen the last 2 years, getting beat by the Phillies in the division series after getting one of the top 2 seeds and having the bye. So it's a legitimate question, even here on June 17th. But for the Dodgers, that's the one thing you have to keep an eye on. So check that receipt later on down the road on whether or not Betts' loss is going to have them slip when it comes to the 2 and 3 seed there in the National League. Because as we all know, they have what? A 9-game and a loss over San Diego, and 8 back are the Padres of the Dodgers. So yes, nothing really to go crazy about there if you're LA. Other than that, yeah, let's talk about the Astros real quick, because they've been in the news where they released Jose Abreu, the former MVP at that time of the Chicago White Sox. And boy, talk about a career that has really fallen off of a cliff. I thought when they signed Jose Abreu, and this was after they won the World Series in 2022, I thought that was a fantastic signing. A guy that you could just plug into that lineup, big bopper, is going to hit minimum 30 home runs in his sleep. And since he's been a part of the Astros, he's done nothing, to the point where they had to send him down earlier this year. And I guess he still hasn't come out of it to where they released him. Now they owe him $30 million. Thankfully, the contract was pretty much favorable. I believe at the time it was 3 years at 51, maybe even $54 million. So it wasn't as if they broke the bank, gave him a 5 for 100, where they're still on the hook for another 3.5 years. They only have another year and a half to pay that $30 million. So not decimating their payroll or their circumstances, but that was one that I'm sure, surprisingly to them and even to me, that came out of nowhere. So Abreu, let's see where he ends up, I'm sure he's probably going to end up on a team that maybe is going to need some offense. Off the top of my head, maybe a team that's young, whether it's a red team that is in the mix for a wild card. Who knows? But Abreu, I'm sure he'll resurface somewhere, but definitely has fallen just on hard times when it comes to what he's been able to do throughout the early part and mid part of his career than the last 2 years in an Astro uniform. And then talk about just an odd story altogether. Speaking of the Astros, Ronel Blanco, remember him? A guy who pitched a no-hitter on April Fool's Day, the earliest no-hitter in the history of Major League Baseball. And then, what was it, about 5-6 weeks ago, was caught with sticky stuff, was suspended for 10 games. Then a lot of people thought, hey, is that no-hitter legitimate? Well, of course it's going to be legit, but now had to sit out for 2 starts because of him finding sticky stuff on his glove or on his wrist or wherever it was. And then he pitches yesterday against the Tigers to what? 7 innings of no-hit baseball. So he threw 94 pitches, so he wasn't going to last even if he were to pitch into the 8th inning and let's say they gave it to him to where, all right, we'll give you the first batter, let's see what happens. No, after 7 innings, no-hit ball. I get it, it's the Tigers. But Blanco, talk about a topsy-turvy year for him. Throws a no-hitter, then gets suspended, and then throws basically another no-hitter, but doesn't go past the 7th inning to see whether or not that he was going to be sustainable. And I can understand why they said, hey, let's pull him at 94. Maybe he had 94 tough pitches, not all of them being tough, but you know what I'm saying. But that was just an odd story coming out of Houston to where he was actually on the verge of pitching another no-hitter. And that would have been something if he did. But that's what you have there. And then you had the Pat Hobert, who was violated the gambling rules for Major League Baseball. Now, who knows if this is going to be a scenario a la Tucupita Marcano, who got suspended, the Padre utility infielder. Now, it's being investigated. Now, they don't know whether he bet on baseball, if it's just gambling, whether he's done it in the ballpark, if they're going to go deep into that investigation. But based on what I've seen here, it does not indicate that he bet on baseball. I'm sure the investigation is ongoing, but right now, he has been put on ice, and Pat Hobert is a guy I'm not really familiar with. He's not one of the top guys that you would see throughout the sport, whether your name is Hunter Wendelstedt. Obviously, we know about Angel Hernandez, his quote-unquote retirement. A lot of the other big-time crew chiefs in baseball that are more prominent, the Todd Tishners, etc. So, Hobert, let's see what's going to happen with his fate. I just bring that up in light of what happened with Marcano as a player. And please, if Oberg was stupid enough to bet on baseball as an umpire, I mean, you can't. I mean, it's bad Marcano did it, he's a player. But an umpire, you're getting Tim Donaghy, NBA referee, feelings all over again, if that's the case. So let's hope that isn't for him. And I don't know if he came out, let's see. Yeah, he's also appealing the decision, of course, so I'm sure he probably feels that, yes, he probably gambled, maybe on other sports, maybe during the NCAA tournament, who knows, but we'll see how that shakes down here over the days and weeks to come. But other than that, let's see what we have with the schedule this week. We talked about the 2 big series, in particular Orioles-Yankees. You do have Padres-Phillies if you want to get into that. But you also have Boston going to Toronto. Mets are in Texas. Now, I'm not getting crazy about the Mets just yet, people. I get it. They've won 11 of their last 15. They're 4 under 500. And I said it before and I'll say it again. Let them get to 500 before we can even talk about it. And as it is, they're going to Texas for 3. And Texas got swept by Seattle. Let's get to that real quick. Now, Texas is 5 games under 500. Seattle, they're 10 over. And for them to get swept by the Mariners over the weekend, they lost 5-0 to punctuate that sweep. I don't know. Is it going to click for the Rangers this year, the defending World Series champs? We know that there could be some hangover with what happened last year. We know no Max Scherzer. We know no Jacob deGrom. Who knows if they're going to come back, whether at the All-Star break or soon thereafter. They're going to need them because if they're going to have any shot to get back in this race, they're going to have to start winning some games. And their offense has not clicked the way it has last year. Of course, their pitching staff is in shambles. So the Rangers are really going through a tough time, and who knows, maybe this is the Mariners' year to win a division and maybe do some damage with their starting pitching. So that was another series I didn't talk about before, but of course have to bring up now as we get into it. But as far as the other series of note, Tampa, Minnesota. Well, Tampa's in last place. I think of Tampa because they've been successful over the last half dozen years. But other than that, you don't really have anything for me. Seattle at Cleveland, that's a series that's, again, maybe not an A+, a la Orioles-Yankees, but you do have two division winners going at it. So that's going to be an interesting litmus test for those teams who are trying to see if they could get in where they fit in with the Orioles, with the Yankees, those two teams in particular. Seattle, not just yet, because although they have made it into the playoffs over the last couple of years, but they don't have a pedigree. It's not as if they're the Astros, and we all know the Astros have been hurting. As I take a quick peek at the standings, when we get to July 4th, which is, think about it, what is that, 2 weeks from this coming Thursday, I'll start to uncover the wild card and where we're at there. But right now, it's still a little bit too early. We're not yet at the halfway point of the season, although we're slowly approaching. A lot of teams have played 71, 72, 73 games, even 74. In some cases, the Yankees 50 and 24. So once we get past July 1st and especially July 4th, I'll certainly get into what the wild card looks like. But the divisions, yeah, they are not close other than the AL East by any standards. Cleveland has a 5-game lead, 7 in the loss over the Royals. Seattle, as I just talked about, 7 in the loss, but 8.5. They're 43 and 31. I said 43 and 33, so I was 2 games off. My apologies there, but an 8.5 game lead there. Phillies, 7 in the loss, but 8 in the NL East over the Braves. Brewers, 6 in the loss, 6.5 over the Cards. And the Dodgers, as I talked about, 9 in the loss and 8. So other than the AL East, you have some big-time separation in the other 5 divisions in baseball. So that will do it there. And then to wrap up, the NFL, as you know, I'm not even looking forward to or even thinking about it, but you had a big signing there on Thursday. Trevor Lawrence, the latest quarterback to get his coin. 5 years, $275 million, $200 million of that guaranteed, with 142 at signing. So for Trevor Lawrence, who got a similar contract to Joe Burrow, yes, so that means it's better than Jalen Hurts, better than Patrick Mahomes, better than Justin Herbert. So for a guy who's won 1 playoff game, and mind you, that playoff game was maybe more on the Chargers losing and Jacksonville winning. And although they played competitively well in Arrowhead the week after in the divisional game, but this is just a case of the market is what the market is. Because we all know, is Trevor Lawrence worth that type of money right now based on what he's done throughout his NFL career? Absolutely not. I mean, please, at least Lamar Jackson, who's making less than that, and we all know he got his bag last offseason, and with Lawrence making more, at least you could say that Lamar Jackson has won 2 MVPs. Now, he's done nothing in the postseason, as we know. He's won 2 playoff games and has not shown up in a big spot where Trevor Lawrence has had a taste of the postseason just once. And all right, he's 1-1. Is that all on him? No, but look at what happened last year. They made it to the postseason, and in the biggest game of the year, where they all had to do was win and they would have been in, they lose to the Tennessee Titans, a team that was already out to sea. Granted, it was at home. Final game for Mike Vrabel, and for that matter, Derrick Henry, but still. So Trevor Lawrence, I get it. Golden boy, number 1 pick, has not come into the league and set it on fire. Let's call it as we see it after coming out of Clemson, winning a national championship, etc. But one more time, is it Trevor Lawrence's fault that the market is what it is? Absolutely not. Because if I had a good right arm and I had some scrambling ability and I had some size, guess what? I'd make at least $40 million a year. Because we can talk about the other players that are making that type of money. Daniel Jones, $45 million a year. Is he worth that money? But one more time, it's not the player. Can't hate the player in this case. You hate the game. Or at least the market value. And the going rate for quarterbacks in this league is starting at $50 million. And yes, Dak Prescott going into the final year of his contract, and let's say he has an MVP caliber year, but spits the bit in the postseason, he's still going to be worth $55, maybe even $60 million, which just goes to show you that with 2 MVPs, 3 Super Bowl MVPs, and 3 Super Bowl rings, and the contract that Patrick Mahomes signed a few years ago, where he got in upwards of almost $500 million, you could even argue that he's being underpaid. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about in the books. Thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the world of sports. If you haven't done so, like I mentioned at the top, subscribe, rate, and review on all podcast platforms. You know the platforms, people, as well as my YouTube channel at JAYREELZ. Content every day, all day. Please, I'm trying to get to 400. I'm at 371. I know it's a paltry number, but slowly but surely, this engine is on the tracks going up the hill. And you know, as me being a full-time content creator, all of the support and all of the contributions that you put forth are just greatly appreciated. If you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion, add the following: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, Twitter, X, JAYREELZ1, just a number, the old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, as you all know, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA. As I like to say, talking sports is birth with nothing but fire, passion, energy, fury, with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South End, the South Pacific, and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ Podcast, on the flip, baby.